This is Joseph Victorious with part 4 of the Idaho murders. And I will focus this video on the surrounding circumstances pre and post of Bryan Kohberger. Motive, accomplices, possibly, and his defense tactics and strategies going forward. So first I'd like to begin by saying that there are certain areas that I'd like to focus on in this video. One of them, and one of the main ones going forward, is what would be some of his defense strategies or tactics as far as getting an acquittal, a lower sentence, etc. I think a major factor in this will be the type of activities that were surrounding the party house, meaning the residence where the murder victims, particularly Kaylee Goncalves, resided in. These would include things such as what kind of party atmosphere was prevalent in the house, what kind of sexual activities, drinking, drugs, and other types of these things took place there. Would he try to use that somehow as an excuse, saying that the DNA would not be available because, at least not directly, because there's so many people there, it could be tied to anybody. And singling him out would be part of his defense. However, this is all speculative, as we don't know what the affidavit is going to bring. Let's hope that it brings some more particulars as far as whether his blood was in the rooms of the victims, on the victims, on his body, on his clothing, in the vehicle, etc. Now let's see here. Of course, because of the defendant's previous history with heroin and possibly other drugs, perhaps I foresee a scenario where he may use drug addiction or meeting someone either at the party or one of the victims outside of the party or at the parties going on as an excuse. That could be one of the tactics he uses. So of course that also would mean that other friends or associates of the deceased victims could also play a part in future trial if this tactic or strategy was used by the defendant. Based on prior comments by the suspect also, particularly the one where he asked police if anybody else was arrested. Now, also, what prior relationship did he have with one of the victims? I'm very curious to know, particularly Kaylee Goncalves. Was he fascinated with her? Was she one of the types of women who in the past had rejected him or bullied him in some way, demeaned him, been derogatory towards him? And that's particularly important to know because this could have set him off or triggered him. Him being the unsub, talking about Bryan Kohberger. And so this could have been one of the triggers. Now, at what point did that take place? Remains to be seen, but that's an interesting angle or perspective to inquire about. And also, there's also reports, just speculative, of him tracking the phones of the victims. Now, as far as I know, there's no cybersecurity particulars taught in criminology that would allow somebody to track somebody's phone or teach them how to do it. This would have had to. There are some cybersecurity criminology, mainly digital forensics, taught in criminal justice classes. I took one myself and a few as electives. However, unless they were modernized, unless it was a new curriculum taught in school, this would not be available. So he would have to have seek help from somebody else, which would lead possibly to an accomplice who had expertise in hacking, mainly tracking phones. So it remains to be seen, but it is interesting to note. Like I said, it could give credence to the theory of him having accomplice or multiple accomplices that helped him in some way, from either beginning, middle, or end. Also, it was speculated that he may have access to the jobs of the victims. I think these two of them worked at the Greek restaurant nearby, and since he's vegan, also this theory came up where he may have met him there, and that's possibly where they've had personal or business interactions about the aforementioned, parties, drinking drugs, or any kind of courting or sexual activities that would have been impossible, that he may have been seeking to obtain, and like I said, may have possibly gotten rejected, and then triggered, to become the unsub that it's possible he became. Let's see here. It's also interesting to know he could have tracked their social activities through, like I said, social media and Instagram. I know I was able to get into to find his Instagram and the victim's Instagram's accounts, but it still remains to be seen whether his Instagram, talking about Bryan Kohberger's, was actually a legitimate Instagram. But anybody with any hacking experience, such as myself, being in the cybersecurity field, would be able to gain access to these. Now, I have not attempted to do so, as it would be illegal. However, the methods and tools are out there, and it would not be that far-fetched or difficult. Now, let's see here. One of the officers in the investigation doubted that the forensic, basically doubted that Bryan had forensic or technical knowledge of forensics. And he is mistaken, like I said, when you take courses in criminology and, criminal justice, the art classes taught that teach you the basics, and so this would be basic forensic methods, chain of custody, and other methodologies used by forensic evidence handling of items, and certain procedures. May not have had advanced knowledge, but certainly would have known basic to intermediate knowledge. And like I said, everything else you can find online. So it's important to note that I think that officer that said that, I believe it was either on YouTube or TV news, he I think was mistaken. He could have been one of the officers in the press conference today. Let's see here. Lastly, I think there is a coordinated opportunity that the police from both states took advantage of when the affidavit was sealed, because I think this will give Bryan a less time to be able to plan a counter defensive until he arrives in Idaho and the affidavit, and when the affidavit is unsealed. I think that this was deliberate. Um, I think that they're trying to use this against his advantage. It would be unfair as a defense. May complain about this in the future, or may have even complained about it in the court today. Who knows? Because it's not open to the public. But I know certainly if I was being accused, I would not like to have my advantages taken from me and then being partly, you know, shackled, metaphorically speaking, from having this knowledge. So I wonder how he would adapt to this moving forward when it comes to his defense strategies. Also, I'm sure he's already planning his counter defense using his expertise of a master's degree and basic PhD level knowledge of criminology. And I'm pretty sure he's already planned and will continue to plan his defense. Let's see. It's interesting to know that if Bryan somehow gets acquitted, um, that he will become wealthy either way, either behind bars or outside in his private life. So he stands to gain a lot from all this publicity he's getting. And I certainly hope that if he is the murderer in this investigation and he does get prosecuted, that this can be minimized. However, we do have certain inalienable rights under the Constitution, and so I'm not sure to what degree he could be prevented from making quite a bit of money from this, whichever way the pendulum will swing. And so I wanted to mention that. It's very important. In conclusion, I still believe that, as such as my first videos of the assessment theory behind the Idaho murders, of who did it and why, that this all revolves around Kaylee Goncalves, and I think she was the primary focus of whatever infatuation or business dealings he had with her pre, during, or post, meaning towards the end of her life. And I do not exclude the possibility that a lookout or collaborator, one or more, participated in this, in these crimes, of course, even if they're never found, unless, of course, he uses that as a final ace up his sleeve, as it were, to make a plea deal with the prosecutors and either get a reduced sentence or better prison conditions if he is found guilty. So this case has fascinated me personally. Just a lot of elements regarding this. It's important also to go back, since I forgot to mention this, that in addition to the comments of the police officer saying that Bryan wouldn't have that much knowledge of forensics, again, I think that's a critical mistake on his part, saying that, because it's also important to note that, people have been using the initials BK, I believe it's in reference to the BTK killer, and Bryan studying about him and other serial killers. But that leads me to the point of saying that, yeah, he studied the crime scenes. He studied the way things were handled. And so, being privy to this knowledge before he committed the murders may have enabled him to better plan his attacks and his post defense if he were to have gotten caught. Perhaps that's why he's a bit smuggy and confident. And I gotta mention this. This is a little bit annoying, but I think there's just a lot of misinformation out there that may not even be true at all. And so I only mentioned some speculative information regarding that in this video. I try to avoid that, but it does. The things that I mentioned do have some logic ties into them, meaning they can be tied using logic. So it's the only reason I mentioned them. If they were illogical or improbable, highly improbable, I would have never mentioned them. But there are other things out there, such as one of the inmates at the jail in Pennsylvania saying that he was, exposing himself, threatening to stab people, and taunting the correctional officers. I don't think any of that is true. They said actually the contrary, that he was a calm and basically collaborating without incident. Now, is it possible that they were hiding or omitting those facts of how he was really behaving in order to not affect the trial going forward? Sort of like try to put a Biden hiding his son's laptop evidence before an election? Maybe. But I guess we're all going to find out when that affidavit is unsealed and we can finally see what the particulars were, what happened. And I do want to say one last thing. Thank you everybody for listening to my videos, wherever it may be. I did some internal analysis of my YouTube account recently, and even though I don't have that many subscribers, because I try not to seek popularity and I haven't really done that many videos, it's interesting to know that I do have at least, I believe it was, 11, I had at least 9 or 10 private subscribers. I wonder who you are. I find it amusing. It could be anybody, but believe me, I thought of all the possibilities, if you're listening to this, of who you are. Just so you know, you can't hide it. You can't try to unsubscribe and think that I'll never know it was you. But anyways, this is fascinating. It's all fascinating. It's going to come down ultimately his defense, tactics and strategies, whether, as I've said before, whether the evidence was mainly in the rooms of the victims. Because it's one thing going to a party and being downstairs or outside, hanging out, talking to people and, getting high or whatever the case may be. And it's another to actually be inside the rooms. Now, just because he was inside the rooms doesn't mean that it's checkmate. It is possible he still may get acquitted. He could come up, depending on what the affidavit showed and what relationship he had with any of the victims or any associates or friends of the victims. He could always, come up with a strategy saying, I knew that guy, and then we happened to, want to make a deal. So he knew where the rooms were located. We went in there. We made a deal of some kind, for party favors or whatever the case may be. And then we got out. That's how my evidence was there. So it's more important that the evidence is actually on the victims themselves, meaning his DNA on the victims, their DNA on him or on his materials like clothing, etc., or their DNA in his vehicle. You know, obviously mainly blood, either theirs or his. Um, so that's what it's going to come down to. If there is no blood from the victims on Bryan Kohberger and or on his vehicle or on his clothing, unless they have his DNA in their hands or fingernails, where it looks like they're trying to defend themselves, it's going to be difficult to get a prosecution. I think there will be a hung jury, maybe possibly an acquittal, especially since for the moment, as far as we know, there's no murder weapon. But of course, the checkmate in this situation would be if the murder weapon is found and if it has DNA. Obviously, that's the smoking gun. But so far, there's no clues as to whether they have found it. It may have been, disposed of forever by whoever the murderer or murderers were. And so yeah, that's where we are right now. Thanks for listening. I will try to make some more videos in the future. Once again, this is Joseph Victoria, cybersecurity specialist, and you can reach me in my About section on YouTube. I have an email address there. So I look forward to reading your emails and your comments. Thanks, and have a good one.